Welcome back, everybody. And I know I was missing yesterday, but I just had such a good day. My back has felt fantastic. My casting is improving. I'm feeling like I'm really improving in that department. Everything is just coming up, Dave, and I'm overall just so happy. And it's because I have a Maxonomic chair, and I don't know if anyone else has reached out and got one of these, but I think if you don't have one yet, Maxonomic is certainly the way to go in the chair department. And now, one up on that, I'm also walking around, or will be walking around soon enough in-game, with the nice Maxonomic chair ward. Still get the embroidery, still use code SMITEMAX, but if you really want to make sure everyone knows you're better than them because you have a gaming chair, you got to get the chair now so you have an in-game ward so you can, place it over their dead body, however you want to do it. But that's Maxonomic, our chair sponsor here for Phase 2 of the SPL. And another man who now has a Maxonomic chair to be sitting on so far here is John Finch, who joins me as my chair too for this fine set. Finch, how's the chair treating you?
I'm not going to lie, Dolson. It took me a little while to set it up, but I'm happy that I put in the time. Rarely have I been so comfortable. Put the other chair in the other room. I don't need it anymore. My life now is back on track.
Right.
I'm sitting in the Maxonomic seat. We're feeling good.
Right, it's the reverse of everything that happened yesterday, of course. But it's our final set of the week here, Finch, and we'll see kind of what we got to walk through so far. Friday, Saturday, Sunday matches. Their SSG Obey is going to round us out, and I think this is a good barometer for maybe where Obey currently stands, because up to this point it's been a lot of, I think, trial and error, maybe, for this Obey squad, trying to figure out the meta. And before we dive too deep into that, I think you got to look at SSG, Finch, and what a great start they've had so far to this phase. As I mentioned, a chance now for a three-way tie up top. I mean, I don't think I'm too off base by saying it's kind of a tale of one team that has really got a great grasp on where they stand in the meta and one that's maybe still searching for it.
No, I'm right there with you, Dave. Space Station has looked consistently ahead of the meta years now in a row. Teams with Raffer on it, teams with Cheerio on it, teams with Dardez always seem to kind of be setting the pace as far as I can see. And Obey so far hasn't showed me they're able to keep up at the pace even once it is set. So I do think that I could see some struggles here for this squad. Space Station's teamwork is unparalleled, and I think, for my money at the very least, they've got the best 3v3 in the game right now with Raffer, Dardez, and Cheerio. So hard to beat those guys.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to find many people who disagree with you there on that front. Have you kind of, I think one thing as well that I've sort of latched onto with this team is the ability to be flexible in this meta. Meta is kind of the buzzword, I think, over the first couple of weeks here. A lot of mid-season changes that these pros are now playing on. So I think the flexibility of SSG has also caught a lot of teams off. The ability to kind of play a few of those diverse meta picks is certainly a boon to their cause.
It is, and I think that's one of the things that makes this team so strong. You don't really know what it is that you're going to be banning up against this team. You don't know what it is that you're going to be playing against. You don't know who it is they're going to be playing around from game to game. They're always so adaptable and so flexible, this Space Station team in particular. And I think a lot of that does start with Cheerio. He'll play tanky junglers. He'll play more assassin types. He'll play whatever it is you need.
Now, we have to talk about their opponents in Obey, and actually I think that's a good leaping off point there, Finch, because, last time we saw this Obey team, Sino really tried to work those warrior junglers into that game plan, and it didn't quite work out for them. And after that game, I remember he tweeted out, "No more warriors in the jungle. I'm never playing them again. I'm retiring the warriors. It's all assassins from here on out." So do you think we start to see maybe some assassins from Sino for Obey?
I'm thinking so. I think we saw Sino tweet that he might be putting the warrior jungles on the shelf, and for what it's worth, I certainly don't think warrior jungles are bad. I think that the situation that Obey find themselves in is that they really, really need Sino to be something close to hyper carry potential if they're going to convert some of their games into win, because I think certainly Sino's playing well. There's no way you can say that the man is a hindrance to the team. It's just that they need him to carry an inordinate amount of the load if Obey are going to win, and I don't know that he can do that on warriors. Certainly, though, on some of these stronger assassins, I think he can pull that off.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. I think that's a great way of sort of looking at this squad. And remember, when Sino first came in, it was sort of this refreshing shot-calling look. I think that changed some stuff around, got Obey their first couple of wins there in phase number 1. Do you think it's accurate when we're talking about this team that it's less mechanical skill, and really is sort of how I introed the segment, that it's just a team trying to figure out how this meta can work for them.
Yeah, I think that's what Obey are really going to need to do. We've talked about this a little bit with Obey, with E-United rather, already, in that we don't know exactly what their identity is. When Weekend was still on the team, they played a lot around some of his jungle picks, and I think that they saw some success with it. But now that they're playing with Sino, what is it that they're going to be? What is the team identity for Obey? How is it that they win games if we look at this team? And right now, I think we still don't know.
I think, and as well, if we're going to zoom out on Obey, I mean, it's about as rough a start to this phase. Not necessarily the results-based, but if you look at the slate that they had, Ghost, Week 1, a Renegades team that has been playing very well Week 2, now SSG, and then they have Radiance in a game next week. So, I mean, you talk about the top 3 teams in Ghost, SSG, and Radiance. You have to play them. You're going to have Renegade. You play Renegades as well, who's looking good. I mean, this is the trial by fire for this Obey team here in Phase 2, trying to figure out the meta. So, I can't imagine worse circumstances to try to get your feet underneath you in Phase 2. Maybe a shot, though, here up against SSG. I think it's going to take, a fantastic game from Obey and maybe a slightly weaker performance from SSG to give them a breath of life in this one. Let's look at the bans, though, see how this one ends up playing out. I think Aphrodite a solid start. Dardes obviously pulling a lot of weight there in the mid lane.
Certainly, right? I don't think you can allow this guy to play Aphrodite right now. He'll absolutely control it. I think Aphrodite is just strong enough in general, even aside from Dardez's proclivity to play this god. So it makes sense to me, as far as Obey is concerned, about a first ban. I'm also curious here, Dolson, just kind of about the general top-tier picks everywhere. We see a lot of Nemesis getting picked up, see a lot of Cthulhu. Obviously, the mage ADCs are strong. With Obey in that first pick spot, they should be able to get something of really high value, and I want to see what they look for.
That's true, and the answer is always then, what do they give up for the following to SSG? With so many left on the table, you really have to pick and choose. So this is, again, a good maybe temperature check on Obey and where they're starting to prioritize some of these meta picks. Olaron takes a seat, so no surprise there, Persephone as well, the first ban out from SSG. We talked about how maybe Aphrodite isn't all that surprising. Hebo has started to see this rise of play. Obey obviously feeling as if Hebo belongs in one of those early bans. Can't let SSG have that one on their side. Cthulhu Umoja, no surprise there. Do you think Hebo warrants a ban, though, Finch?
I think so in this specific case, because Cherio and Dardes can both play the pick at a really, really high level. So not only would you be giving up just a really valuable sort of hyper carry type pick, but you'd be giving up a flex pick where you wouldn't always know exactly how that one would be getting piloted. I understand why they're looking to ban it, but as we kind of already covered, there's a lot of really high value picks right now. Maybe there's something to the idea of leaving some of them open so that they have plenty to choose from on the backswing, considering that Space Station will get to take 2.
And maybe no one more highly prioritized this weekend than this Amaterasu. I believe she has been first pick effectively all day today, if I'm remembering correctly. So it continues here with Obey. So their finger largely on the pulse of what a lot of the other, or I guess 2 of the other SPL teams are feeling here to round out the weekend. Jingwei and Freya, though. You talk about the potential scaling of 2 auto attackers, and I don't think it gets much higher than a Jingwei and Freya in your corner.
No, with Olaron banned, I think you're 100% right? Jingwei and Freya are about as good as it's going to get. And what I'm really interested in is these are both hunters that I would think of really belonging over in the long lane. Between these 2, I suppose Freya fits a little bit more in mid. But I don't know. There's like 5% of my brain that wants to remember that people used to be playing Freya jungle. Maybe Cherio ended up piloting this one too. Certainly, I think a good top 2 picks here for Space Station.
Yeah, absolutely. And what that really shows is that Obey is feeling that Aphrodite and Hebo, Cthulhu, no surprise there, are a larger threat than what Jingwei or Freya would bring to the table. So we'll have to see how that pays off for them. Now, you talk about late-game scaling. Kali has that plenty in her corner. And this was a conversation we had, Finch, I think, around junglers going into this phase, especially with the Golden Blade changes. We assumed incorrectly in a large part that the Bakasura would be a massive jungle pick. The Kali would be very important there as well. Sino apparently was not kidding that he's going to hang up the Warriors, and Kali is a strong way to kind of dip into that assassin pool.
It does mean, though, that he's going to be waiting till a little bit later on in the game to get his value, and I'm worried that that might have some similar problems that the Warrior jungle had. Not that they would come on late, it's just that maybe he wouldn't be able to have quite as much impact early as he would have liked. Now, as long as Obey can keep this game even relatively close to even, moving into maybe 4 items or so for this Kali, then obviously Sino will have the potential to carry. And I wonder if this Cupid can get them there, Dolson. We have seen this become a much more popular pick lately, really punishing gods that rely on their dash, that don't have enough CC immunity or slow immunity in their kits. Maybe this Cupid Alma can get that Kali there.
And I think the continued thread to your point there is that Obey, at least through their first 3 picks, have kind of shifted their mentality and figured out that a lot of the picks that are working for the other SPL teams might work for them here as well. So I think a strong start for this Obey squad, and are certainly giving themselves a chance right out of the gate in picks and bans. A Wukong locked in 3rd overall for SSG. Haven't gotten a chance to really talk about that one all that much. He's seeing a little bit of a rise in popularity. But alongside him is this Ganesh at a 16% pick rate, 8% rather ban rate. Is seeing a lot of value, I would argue, out of the support role.
And very scary in Raffer's hands as well. Dulcet certainly has the potential to control a map on this pick, and especially when you consider that Freya and Jingwei are going to have you low anyway when you're taking a lot of surprise damage from Dharmic Pillars, maybe some extra potential for lockdown if he places it beneath a Banish or alongside a Tiger Stun from the Sun Wukong, or even on the knockup from Jingwei. I think that Raffer is really poised to have an excellent game here on this Ganesh, just based on the picks they already have.
Now, here's an interesting, I think, conversation piece. We saw Poseidon, remember, in our previous set, but it was really this auto-attack-centric build on the Poseidon. I think it found some really good value there as well. Is that something that, I think continues to make some sense to you here for Obey? I'm not going to ask you to predict his build entirely, but I do suppose the Poseidon, rather, brings that flexibility to the table.
Yeah, I'm not so sure if we'll end up seeing it here or not. I know as you kind of tried to bail me out there, but in terms of its viability, I don't know that we saw a ton of value out of that basic attack version of the Poseidon, man. You really want to make sure Whirlpool Kraken are getting plenty of value out when you're playing this Poseidon. It can potentially take Freya out of the game before she has a chance to run away with all that lifesteal, or maybe the same for this Jingwei. So I feel like you want it to be capable of bursting.
And I think the big question here, Finch, is for Obey, over the first couple of games they've had, it was sort of, they haven't given themselves that chance in picks and bans. I figured they had through their first 3 here. Do you think the Obey squad have done themselves some justice here with their 5?
I mean, I think so. I mean, one of the critiques we had of Obey was that it didn't seem like they were maybe up to date on this meta. They were letting through too much powerful stuff. They have let through this Freya that is obviously very, very scary. That's over there for SSG, but they've got some really strong picks on their side too. As long as they've got a plan to keep this Freya in check, maybe that can be the job of this Kuzenbo, then certainly they do have a chance. But if this Freya is allowed to run rampant, we might as well go ahead and get everything swapped over to Game 2 and get ready for that.
Yeah, sometimes it takes, a little bit extra. We've seen a Freya die once or twice in lane, and somehow that's not enough. Obey looking to find their first win of phase number 2. SSG trying to stay undefeated. We'll go down to Gormizer and Obey's #1 fan, Mifflin, on the call.
Thank you so much, Dave. That's right, it's me, Gormizer. Alongside me is Mifflin. And Mifflin, we already know which way you are leaning in this set as far as things are going. And if you watched the SPL waiting room on Friday, you probably know how I'm leaning. So we want to know how you're going to be leaning in chat. Of course, you can vote who you think is going to be able to take this set as that poll comes through. But Mifflin, we got to look at it. You trade out, I think, first and foremost, the Amaterasu for the Jingwei and the Freya. And ultimately, you go this Kuzenbo. How are you feeling about the drafts that these teams are bringing into this game?
I think that Space Station have a lot of ways that they're just going to be able to straight up win the match. I mean, if, as Finch highlighted, this Freya gets off to a roaring start, there's not a lot of ways Obey's going to be able to deal with it, barring inbound on this Kuzenbo. If he builds into Thorns, he maxes out the Reflect, he might be able to itemize towards a little bit of anti-heal a la Pestilence, get some Divine Ruins on your squad as well. That's one way you can address this Freya. My entire eyes for an Obey dub are how well Sino's going to adapt to playing these assassins in the jungle. We know from seasons past that he's very adept at doing it. He's one of the players that can really get a huge amount of value out of this Kali, but it really comes down to how well his team plays around him.
Well, it wouldn't be inbound if he wasn't immediately ready to jump into the fray and see what kind of danger he can spark up over in the duo lane. But I think that conversation right now around Sino is going to be important, because not only is it something that can help out this team having this Kali, especially late game, it simultaneously feels like you take it away from Cherio. Not saying that his Naja is any worse than his Kali, but knowing that that's going to be the case makes a big difference, as here in mid, you're going to actually see both of the junglers looking to get aggressive. Dardes a little bit low, and luckily he's Jingwei, so expect a lot of this. Dashing out of danger, and Cherio potentially sashing to save the day. And right now it seems like Chad is a little bit against you overall, Mifflin. 78-22 in favor of Space Station.
Yeah, all I heard is 22%, and they might be right. Obey have the aggressive positioning around the red buff right now, and Cherio and Darda is going to get forced out by inbound. That's a clean invade, but one buff invade makes not for a lead. You got to continually put on the pressure on the map, and that's going to be hard to do when you have a god like Kali out of the jungle. Her early game isn't strong. I mean, that's not breaking news to anybody. She needs that itemization to come online, whereas this Naja, and it looks like he might be moving in towards the Sledge a little bit earlier on, or maybe even a Frostbound. He's going to go for a more utility-centric Naja build. That might just come online just way too quickly for Obey to deal with.
It's definitely going to be difficult, I think, overall for Sino, but I mean, considering what we've seen out of him so far this phase, the Warriors definitely didn't seem to click overall in the jungle, so maybe it's going to be a safety pick, even if it is a late game pick either way. The one thing that also catches my eye throughout all of this that Obey are bringing in, we had talked a little bit on the desk about the fact that Wolfie's bringing this Poseidon. Earlier today, you got to talk about it being kind of this ring auto-attack build, and already it looks like the start for a Ring of Hecate there for Wolfie. How are you feeling about seeing this and the way Poseidon has kind of escalated into this, even though he's not really known for his auto-attacks?
I think it's going to be very hard for Wolfie to get value out of a full auto-attack-centric build, but we've already seen even earlier on in the split that Final K took Hades into the solo lane and built Ring of Hecate on him, but didn't itemize fully towards that auto-attack build. I think if you want to build Ring of Hecate, it's a strong enough item stat stick that you could just stick it on just about any auto-attacking mage that is going to swing out a little bit, but it doesn't mean you have to completely pigeonhole yourself there. You can still go for items like Spear of Desolation, Soul Reaver, standard mage items, and just utilize that passive on Ring of Hecate to help you out with objectives, which is the build that I prefer to see on Poseidon. That said, if you do decide to go for the multiple rings and the Toxic Blade, you're going to have unparalleled amounts of mobility. It's going to be very hard to lock down this Poseidon, likely the fastest god in the game, and he's going to be able to find those Krakens a lot more easily, even if they are slightly less impactful.
Yeah, he do be zooming with that kind of build. He will get across the map, no problem. The only question then would be the impact of the Whirlpools, the Krakens, things like that, but we'll just have to lay and wait and see what Wolfie decides to do. It's the combination, I think, that Obey are bringing into this that is keeping me the most interested and maybe the most on my edge for this game, right? Ducky, we know what you can do with an Amaterasu, especially when she has a good game. We've seen what Kali can do at the top level, and even though it's maybe with a slightly different build, we've seen Poseidon, we've seen this Cupid really, really step forward, and now Sino trying to make sure he can get ahead. That Kraken's going to be enough damage from Wolfie just on the edge to clip Dardes there, and he's going to be able to lock him down. That's the way you want to start off the game, is getting that first blood.
Especially considering they have a Kali out of the jungle, and Sino's been playing incredibly proactive, constantly trying to find this pressure onto the mid lane, and it's been working out for them, and I think that's one way to address having Jingwei in mid. She's a god that's going to be lacking in pressure largely. She's going to need a lot of peel. Sure, she's playing incredibly safe, but as far as fight potential in the 3v3, Jingwei in the early game, that's not something I want in my corner. So I like that Obey is shifting their focus towards playing around the mid. Make sure you get there where your power spikes are still going to be a little bit slower because of the Kali, but still pretty strong considering Jingwei is only level 5.
Well, we've seen Inbound try to do this on Ymir and it not work well, but here in Kuzenbo, you lock him against the wall. Fields of Love ensures that they are locked down. Cherio going to be put into the ground here by Obey, and now they can turn that into an invade. They even have already taken that purple buff. Everyone on Obey looking for blood, and right now they're out to find it. This is a brilliant start for this team considering how most people thought this was going to go.
It is, but I'm not willing to count them as a dub just yet, man. We're 5 minutes in, 2,000 golden lead. That is a demanding start, or a commanding start, rather, but it's going to come down to these objectives, and that's really where I think Space Station is going to start to shine through. iRaffer on Ganesh is going to control space incredibly well. Vote on this Freya, despite being slightly behind, is still a Freya who has gone on dying. You got to address that at some point. the damage output that Space Station have once they group up as a Death Ball, the setup potential with Naja, the knockups from Jingwei on the tail end of the Ring Fire Wheels, there's a lot that Obey are going to have to fight through if they want to win out around these Gold Fury fights.
And I think leaning into that even more, it's not just the objectives that are going to play into this, but honestly, Time, you had mentioned that Jingwei isn't necessarily who you're thinking in your early 3v3s is going to be the victor of a lot of fights. And when you look at Freya, we're not talking about an early game god there either. She's definitely moved up in terms of her timing from what she used to be, but it still, you know, isn't the first, even 10 minutes of the game where she's going to dominate. It's after that Ring of Hecate is built. Honestly, maybe even one more item to make sure she can super control her lane. But as of right now, it still feels like the build-up for SSG. And so I want to raise you one more question, which really is going to be if Obey can keep this pace up, or if those big powerhouses coming online is going to be a thorn in their side they're going to have to deal with. Oh, it's going to take a little bit for it to deal with it. They're going to have enough bleed damage there to stop Dardes. Burns the ult from the Jingwei as well. Kraken might have to be used, but if you're looking to open up a gank onto the duo lane, that's exactly how you want to do it. And Inbound is already looking to read that. The Whoop going to be off the mark, and Raffer maybe not locked down enough, but this is going to at least read another invade here for Sino.
Man, I love it when the players answer the questions you ask me for me. Can they keep up that pace? Yes, if Sino keeps playing like this, but Cherio getting a little bit aggressive mid, doesn't find the ultimate. Wolfie counting his lucky stars is going to make it out alive, and that's clean play. Obey have to keep up the pace. They have to continue to find this pressure because they've got this early game god inside of Kuzumbo. Cupid's very strong in the early game. They are certainly outscaling on that duo side of the map at this current point in time. I want to see them look to force these fights around Gold Fury.
All right, now it's Ducky who's in a little bit of trouble. Nika goes up into the somersault cloud. The dash is going to come through, and Cherio's come over. The sash going to connect. There's no mana, no health there for the solo laner from Obey, so they're going to at least be able to retaliate a little bit now on the side of Space Station Gaming. Sino kind of wants to fight, but kind of doesn't. I don't think they're going to be able to get here in time to stop Cherio from getting back, although Inbound definitely going to be hard-pressed to stop pressing W for a second. And this, you know, again, I think I agree with you. It might be a little too early to call it, but so far, this 8 minutes of play has felt like a completely different Obey than we got to see last week.
Well, it's probably because they're in the lead, Gore. We're not used to seeing Obey having this kind of lead in the early game. And you know what? It's something that we might want to get used to seeing. Right now, I'm worried for Ducky. Falling behind a Sun Wukong, who is already a god that you really wouldn't expect to have the ability to bully out an Amaterasu. Now he's going to have a lead. He's already itemizing into the Soul Eater. He's going to get additional penetration, additional sustain, additional cooldown coming along. It's going to be very hard for Ducky to fight in. So I think he might have to shift his attention now towards rotating out of this lane, leverage the fact that Amaterasu, just from that first ability, is going to have a lot more movement speed. Try and get involved in the team fights, play around the core of your team, which right now is going to be Wowie. It's going to be Sinosure. These are the players Obey have to look to facilitate. Nika with a lead, not nice for you, but still, it's just a Sun Wukong.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to be able to rotate. He has some cool numbers on him, but it's not enough to control a team fight. Much like Kali's trying to do. A good Kraken once again onto Vote, sitting at about 1/3 HP, but it's going to be Raffer that gets burned down first. Fields of Love thrown out, and Sino's low, but Dardes doesn't have the ability to chase him down. Wolfie doing some good zoning, and it's going to force the two carries over here for SSG out of there. In fact, they're not done yet. Vote going to get pushed up against the wall. Wowie is going to be able to pick up the kill there. Inbound uses the ult to displace Cherio, and again, even though they might not be able to chase down the kill thereafter, I think a good call from them to be able to pulley out exactly who they want to. A good kill, a couple of kills even, onto the duo lane to shut down SSG.
Ooh, did you see that Ring of Hecate damage coming out from Wolfie there? Now Dardes is going to have to start showing some respect in that mid lane just for the auto attack damage. And I like it. Obey's continually putting on the pressure. This is where they were struggling in previous weeks, even if they were able to establish 200, 300 gold leads, which was, again, rare for them. Now they aren't really struggling with it. They know what they need to do. Continually find this pressure. They were able to force out Vote's beads, force out the Valkyrie discretion as well. Now is the time to continue looking for that aggression onto the Freya. Don't let her come online. And Wowie with a level lead already, stacking to the Devo's gloves, likely going to look at Atalanta's bow next. Things are looking very good for Obey, but they're still not in the clear.
Yeah, it scares me, Mifflin. I can't count how many times we've seen Frey even go down 3 levels and still fight back from it and have no problem boxing you 3 levels down. So you want to maybe keep her shut down. That Ring of Hecate just now online for Vote with this back. So it's going to be Well, interesting to see if this is maybe the turning tide 10.5 minutes in. Or again, if Obey can hold this, because, I mean, still hovering at that 2,000 gold lead. They've been maintaining this for the last 5 or so minutes. It has been very consistent play for them, and it almost reads exactly the way you expect it to. Sino jumps in, stuns, Kraken comes out from Wolfie, and then they just do whatever it takes to get as many kills off of that play as possible. And that's been, I think, every single engagement they've started.
I mean, it's a strategy that they drafted around, and I think it should continue to work now. Wolfie's the one who has the largest lead on the map. You want to continue fighting around him. He's about a level and a half, maybe a level and 2/4 up on the enemy mid laner, Dardes. If they continue to fight around this Poseidon, that's going to be where all the synergy comes from. And again, that's Space Station's weakest point. They can't play around this Jingwei in mid because she's not a powerhouse just yet.
Well, right now they're looking to fight around Vote and this Freya. You said keep her shut down, and it looks like that's what they're going to try to do. Inbound into the ult, going to be able to find the kill under tower, but the rest of SSG have rotated in. Inbound, incredibly low, Dharmic pillars. Dardes goes up into the sky. One more shot is all it's going to take, and Inbound ends up losing his life. Ducky is rotated in. The Dazzling Offensive not going to find any stuns, but it looks like Obey maybe just playing a little bit of damage control now, turning their eyes to the Gold Fury, forcing SSG to come into this fight. They're going to use the Kraken to confirm that one, but SSG is not done yet. They want to chase these kills. The question is if they can catch up, and it seems like the answer might be no. Sino willing to poke his head right back in, but it might be too dangerous to re-engage. Wolfie trying to sniff out the danger. Everyone on SSG pulling back, and that's a huge win for Obey.
Yeah, what a heads-up play. Even Inbound dying there was very impactful for that fight. He drags the entirety of Space Station towards their own Tier 2 tower, which creates the space for them to start to pull out that Gold Fury. They still maintain the Kraken for that confirmation. It works out magnificently. So far, Obey's been doing a good job of maintaining this lead, but even then, the slash line is 6-2. They've established Gold Fury dominance, but that 2,000 gold lead that we saw at the 5-minute mark has only grown to 3. Space Station is playing the map just a little bit better, farming up the neutral objectives, the mid camps, their own buffs. They're doing a very good job mitigating loss.
And overall, even though the fights aren't going their way, like you said, as long as they can mitigate as much gold as possible when you lose things like a Gold Fury that fast, I don't think they're going to have much to worry about. As Dardes Vote come online a little bit more, yes, so far they've been easy to shut down. The question is how, again, consistently can you do this over and over again? If you have to dump everything into a Freya, late game, eventually she's going to bite back. It'll be the question, I think, again, of Ducky and Nika when they do make these rotations, what they're able to do, because that was a pretty big swing from Ducky there. And I think it's something we expect to see. Teamfights just feel a little bit better from a Amaterasu than they do from a Sun Wukong, and I think Ducky's going to leverage that as much as possible.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, Dazzling Offensive is one of the best engage tools in the game. He's going to come in, look for a multi-man stun, likely a silence to follow up. He's got movement speed, so he should be able to out-rotate Nika from that lane. So even despite being just one level down, I think Ducky should be able to get a little bit more relative value out of his pick at this phase of the game. It's just how well are Obey going to be able to leverage that. So far, he's only rotated out once, and it's resulted in a Gold Fury kill. Now the only objective left is Pyromancer, and Obey are going to take it away for free. They're doing a very good job controlling the neutral objectives, but even then, that 3,000 gold lead that we highlighted earlier has remained stagnant despite Obey taking all these neutral objectives, and it's just because Space Station is playing so well, splitting their farm. I think Obey have a huge hill to climb up here. Space Station is a team that is very distinctly European. They will wait for that 20 to 30 minute mark and then start to look for those in grouped up team fights to push their lead.
Alright, now they're going to be trying to force Wowie to play the game a little differently. Fields of Love comes out. Cherio gets the stun. He's one hit away, but Wowie's not going to be able to find it. Valkyrie's Discretion comes down. One more shot is all it takes, and the Aegis isn't going to last long enough there. Inbound is rotated over, and Sino's going to make his way in as well. It's going to be difficult to lock them down, but there's the Dharmic Pillars forcing them to make the decision. Vote in the Whirlpool, now in the Kali ult as well. The damage is looking to be good on the Freya. One more hit from Wolfie is all it takes, and they get the kill onto the carry for SSG, but Inbound in an unfortunate position after watching his mid laner go down. They might trade out too much here, and SSG looking to come away with a huge victory of this gank.
That Freya kill just took way too long for Obey, and Space Station had plenty of time to rotate in. A lot of it comes down to the fact that Bobby's push wasn't too good. They got beads out immediately, and even then pushing him into the purple buff was slightly away from Sino, so Sino missed out on his stun there as well. Space Station are doing a very good job of just making sure that they are standing wherever they need to be, and already that Obey lead that we were so excited for has really started to dissipate. It's under 2,000. Experience is just about even, if not, certain members of Space Station are ahead. It's not looking too good for Obey, and I think it's really going to come down to this next objective fight. Whoever gets this Oni Fury first sets up the defensive positioning, should be able to sneak away with it. Space Station has fantastic objective burn. Dharmic Pillars is going to be shredding the defense and the health bar at the exact same time. 2 hunters, 1 magical, 1 physical for Space Station inside of Jingwei and Freya means that any objective that they're allowed to touch for more than 5 seconds isn't going to last much longer than 5 seconds. But the same can be said of Obey. I really think it's going to come down to the team fight.
And that's actually one of the things that we talked about a lot at the very beginning of the year. I think it plays a huge role here now. Since we've seen hunters kind of rotating over into mid with these magical carries coming online, the missing burst ults that typically come with mages, much like Poseidon has here in the Kraken, means that it's not as easy to confirm that objective anymore. You have to be a little more cautious here if you're SSG. Wolfie could just run up, hit 4, and potentially steal it away. Are you worried about that kind of potential? Do you think SSG are going to make sure Wolfie is a non-factor to be able to make sure they can get this Oni Fairy?
I think so. I mean, they have plenty of ways to control space. Nikas should be looking to control Wolfie every single time Space Station group up on an objective. If Cherio is the first one to find Wolfie, God help him, he's just going to get Windfire Wheels and die right there. There's so much that they can do. But as far as objective confirm, Obey certainly have it. So Space Station are very smart players. They know that as well. So they're going to be looking to either find a pick before they go for it, or force a rotation in, and then look to zone out the enemies.
Well, there's the Fury started. Sino gonna blink in. Space Station gonna be able to get it just before the Kraken could try and steal it away, but Sino isn't done just yet. Well, correct me, he's done now. SSG said no to the ult and no to the kills. They take him down as fast as they can, but they go jungler for jungler as Cherio gets taken down. Now it's going to be Ducky doing everything in his power to zone out Nika and stop him from getting onto the backline, but inbound is in between 4 members of Space Station Gaming, and they're not going to be as lenient. They're going to take that kill, 3 of them on the side of SSG, alongside the Oni Fury, and the pressure seems to flip at, well, the drop of a hat.
Yeah, Space Station now looking at their first commanding lead of the game, and that's hard to say. It's only 200 gold, but at this point of even 18 minutes in, their team is going to scale incredibly well. Jingwei is going to become a standard hunter. Freya is literally Freya. I don't need to sing her praises anymore. And Obey just kind of play it a little bit rough around that objective. They all drop their ultimates at the same time. Fairly easily avoided by Space Station. Then they no longer have any tools to help out with that re-engagement, so Space Station chased them out perfectly once that gold 3 gets confirmed. It's just a bit of unfortunate timing for Obey. I like that idea from Space Station to group up around the fire, see if maybe no one from Obey is able to rotate in, but then they think better of it once they see Ducky go for the more confirmed objective inside of that tier 1 tower. Space Station, they're in a good spot, man.
I mean, they pulled pretty much everything right back into their power, and as you had highlighted, that 200 gold now shifting closer to 1,000. But it's still going to take them a little bit of time, I think, to get online. Wards, though, going to be important coming into this, and you can see right now Obey do not want to let anyone on SSG control this right side jungle, with Pyromancer coming back up, with Fire Giant being big. 19 minutes in, I think the earliest we've seen a Fire Giant was 16 minutes. It doesn't happen too often, but this, 18 to 22 minute period is where the threat really happens. You lose one Fire Giant, and it feels like everything can spiral out of control from there. So maybe even more important for Obey to stick the landing on this next fight. Otherwise, it might just be SSG. Those first 10 minutes truly might not have meant anything if the next fight goes SSG's way.
Yeah, Fire Giant is so impactful in this phase of the game because of the map state. Fire Giant's almost going to guarantee you to take all of Obey's towers. The same could be said of Obey if they're able to take Fire Giant themselves, and that's just so much global gold waiting around, global experience as well. You back up, you've already got the lead because you have the best buff in the game, and then you return to base and get an itemization lead as well, which is why we see these early Fire Giants around the 18 to 20 minute mark really get prioritized with these teams, because it's one of those surefire ways to guarantee yourself a lead.
Right now, SSG are lurking in the jungle, waiting for someone to make a mistake. The whoop just off the mark, but the sash is going to connect. At least forces the beads there from Wolfie, and now it's Vote taking a lot of damage in return. Inbound going to have the displacement. The question is if he can do anything with it. Valkyrie's discretion returns some of the damage, but Vote's incredibly low, and Ducky recognizes it, goes into the backline to try and get him, gets the stun, but is trying to get the lockdown for the kill. Otherwise, it's Wolfie who's in trouble. Nika looking to come in on the somersault cloud, slams down, finds the kill. Ducky incredibly low. Sino finally confirms that kill onto Vote, but did they commit too much to do so? Ducky loses his life, Sino goes down as well. It's a 3-for-1 trade, and they're not done yet. If you're Space Station Gaming looking to try and maybe run down this tier 1 inbound, Wowie don't have much to defend here.
These engagements are so disjointed from Obey. Immediately inbound, looks for the ultimate to try and confirm the kill on the Vote. Doesn't quite find it because of the Valkyrie's discretion, but he keeps on holding W. Ducky forced to dive the tower to try and finish up that kill. Doesn't quite do it himself. So then Sino's doing the exact same thing, going to that tier 2 tower. Space Station, almost on accident, drags Obey into possibly the worst positioning they could have been in, inside the enemy tier 2 tower from behind against a late game team who made it here ahead. It seems like Obey is just a little bit frustrated with the pace of the game, and it's getting to their heads.
I mean, tier 1's still up at that time, too. It feels almost awkward to jump that deep, that far. Ducky and Sino try to go for it, so maybe a little bit of an overcommitment, as you highlight, from Obey. They've got a little bit of pressure still. The minions maybe favoring them in left and mid, but that Pyromancer going the way of SSG, this red buff invade, might not be the cleanest thing to try and do. It's not 5 minutes in anymore. They don't have that lead they were able to do with earlier. And so now they're going to have to fall back here. Mifflin, if you're playing Obey here, or if you are Obey, if you're trying to shot call, where are your eyes going? Like, what do you do to try and stabilize right now? Because it feels like it's starting to get out of hand.
Well, I'm telling Bobby to stop going in as aggressive as he has been. A lot of these fights have been started up by him, and it's just not working out. But this man likes the W key, so we're going to give up on that call right there. Next up is damage control. So far, we're looking at a 4,000 gold deficit. That's not completely crippling. You can go back to farming, try and play safe, commit yourself not towards fighting on these objectives, but maybe try for steals, control vision. But with the waves pushed up as they are, the only way Obey is going to be able to find farm is through a fight.
Well, right now, potentially looking for something, and you had highlighted it earlier, the desk had mentioned it, but right now Raffer on this Ganesh, stopping inbound from being able to be as aggressive as he wants. Catching that dash out to stop him from displacing teammates has been just, well, iconic overall, and now looking to potentially get the lockdown. Dardes is here, Nika is here, Dharmic Pillar's gonna come down as well to force him to take a very specific path through the jungle to get to safety. It doesn't feel like SSG can really collapse in on it, but Nika doesn't seem to care. They're going to be going for it anyway. Up into the sky goes Cherio, and now he's going to be coming down as well with Sino. That's going to be an easy kill, easy cleanup. Overall, Fields of Love comes down, detonates, but doesn't seem to be helping too much. Kraken is going to be able to come through as well, but it's not enough damage to lock down anyone. It's 3 for 0 so far. SSG continuing to barrel down the right lane. Vote going to find himself a double kill. This tier 2 going to disappear just shortly. And SSG, honestly, they could run it down here, Mifflin. They have 30 seconds uncontested. Obey might have just lost game 1.
Yeah, you say could, I say will. I mean, 40 seconds left on the nearest respawn. All 5 members relatively healthy on the side of Space Station. And how did that fight go wrong for Obey? Inbound was a little bit too deep, alone at the enemy back camps, gets caught out, starts to run away. The rest of Obey has to move up and try and peel for him and lose their lives in return as well. It's just over-aggression right now. They're not quite sure where they want to put their support in these team fights. I like the idea. Inbound wants to get proactive, wants to turn the game around himself, but you got to know when to hold them and when to fold them. And when you're 6,000 gold down 22 minutes into the game, that's a fold 'em situation every time, Gore.
I mean, you had literally said it before that fight, but that's the time to turn around and walk away, right? I mean, you have to get out of that engagement if you're inbound. Unfortunately for him, he ends up just holding on a little bit too deep. The Dharmic Pillars force him to stay in that engagement. It honestly felt like it was slipping through SSG's fingers for a second there as well. They almost could have gotten out. And then Cherio just decided, nope, we're going to make sure we win this one. Goes up into the air with Sino, and then the rest was history. At least for game number 1. There's still a second game to try and turn it around. Obey had a good first portion of it, but you've heard us talk about it enough. Let's go ahead and go to the desk and see if they can break down what went wrong for Obey.
I appreciate it, fellas. Obey was counting their money while they were still sitting at the table there, and they lost it. quickly. In 9 minutes, I remember thinking, how did they just lose this game? They were far and away ahead of it early on. In Finch, it's like dream scenario. Your Kali's gotten a couple of kills online early. This mid Poseidon has gotten some pressure put there. You're thinking this is exactly what Obey want. They've got the meta picks on their side, and then it just crumbles, just like that.
It's tough because I had some misgivings about this composition, but it was none of those that was a problem. I was worried Sino wouldn't be able to get involved early enough, but he actually looked excellent throughout the first 10 minutes of this game, really getting a lot of value out of the Destruction Ultimate, as well as the Kali stun, and setting up for Wolfie to have some big Krakens. But really, man, it only took a couple of team fights for things to go around. The Fury fight around the 17-minute mark, where Space Station pulled the Fury, and they're able to confirm over Wolfie's Kraken, and Freya's able to avoid Sino's dive on the Kali as well. I mean, things got out of hand really very quickly because Obey couldn't get far enough ahead with that early game lead.
Right, it was just 2 pivotal points where things really start to shift around here. Yeah, 23 minutes in, all one short of a deicide, and it's inbound that's left alive, and nothing he can do about that. It's just, you know, I guess the silver lining there, if you're Obey or an Obey fan, the moral victory, I suppose, still a team that could use some of those, is that the early game largely went in your favor. Now let's figure out how to shift things around there in that mid game. But SSG, I mean, this is obviously losing early isn't necessarily their MO, but kind of keeping things under wraps, and then these big fights where they explode out and build this lead is just what they do so well. I think Nika as well had a good game on this Wukong, close to top in the game. I mean, this guy just pulls so much weight out of the solo lane. Game in, game out. You know, I think you got to keep your eyes on Nika and what he's able to do.
You do, and I want to make sure we're giving Space Station their due credit here. You know, I've kind of talked about some of the things we didn't like about Obey, but you have to give credit to vote for how well he's able to play this Freya. Multiple times, he was the focal point when Sino was diving in the backline, but he was able to use the banish, use the Valkyrie's discretion to get out of trouble long enough to let the rest of his team come to him. Or what about the dive in left when they're looking for him kind of in between the Tier 1 and Tier 2 tower, and he buys so much time there that the rest of the squad is able to show up. You already talked about Nika, but Dardes played the Jing Wei insanely well this game too. In mid, who knew Jing Wei mid was this nasty? So really, Space Station from top to bottom, it didn't take long for them to get right back into the groove.
Right, that's what we figured we would see from this team once the wheels started turning, once they got going. It's always the presence that they bring. Again, I think one of the good takeaways, though, before we move into picks and bans, or as we move into picks and bans for game number 2, is that it is a refreshingly better look as far as meta takes go, I think, for Obey. By and large, I think it was a better meta draft there from them, and it looked like it was going to win, and then maybe some decision-making and some team fighting just doesn't go their way. So at least we've gotten that put behind us. Now the question is, how do you adapt some of what your ban preference was? It was a Jing Wei and a Freya that made its way through in exchange for this Amaterasu. That's a hefty swing, I think, you take there. This Amaterasu is going to outvalue a Jing Wei and a Freya.
It is, if that is how the trade ends up going, right? You're not going to get nearly as much value of the Ama as the other team did of their top 2 picks. But for me, Dalton, I think what we're really seeing from Obey is that they're getting disjointed and lost in these fights. How many times is Sino a solo agent in these fights trying to 1v3 in the backline? Or how many times was Inbound way on his own, you know, taking a whole bunch of damage, sure, but dying basically all on his own with no chance of realistic follow-up? I think that we're getting to the point now where they're picking good pieces and even executing them well for those first few minutes of the game, but they have to make sure they're on the same page throughout the entirety of the game, or just like in Game 1, it's not going to amount to very much.
And I guess we sort of joked about it. I guess that lends itself to the Kali pick. If Sino kind of just said, all right, I'm going to take this into my hands. In the best of times, the Kali, that's, you know, when she works, I'll dive in, hopefully get some resets, and can carry this fight from here on out. Worked a little bit. That's all Game 1 talk. It was, you know, 23 minutes, as short as it was, a lot of fun to kind of look at and break down exactly how we got to the finish there. Bans, I believe, unchanged. And now picks, unchanged for Obey. The Amaterasu for Ducky, still, you know, what Obey value the highest. I can't imagine SSG shy away from one or both of what they had for their first 2 picks in game number 1 there. And it's at least going to be the Freya there, Finch. So Obey still at least feeling confident with what they brought in the early game and hoping to change some stuff around, at least when it comes to Amaterasu.
And you saw some of the, I think, extra value that Freya brings in that game, as they are indeed going to go with those same 2 picks. It's not just that I think she has some of the best 1v1 potential in the whole game, but that she does have some added safety measures. We talked about the Banish, we talked about the Valkyrie's Discretion, and then obviously the high lifesteal as well. Sometimes it's not because Freya does a bunch of damage, it's because she always has the threat to do a bunch of damage, and she's hard to all-in commit at times as well, and leave you in a good enough position to take a fight on the backside against the rest of her team.
Right, and I think hopefully, you know, keep things the same. Rather, is the word I'm looking for there. If you're SSG, because I think Vote, all things considered, had a good game on the Jingwei, despite being looked at pretty heavily by Obey. Through the first 5 here, same picks. Yeah. Another Cupid locked in by Obey. You know, I think Wowie had a decent showing early on. Is kind of the thread we're following here. And then a Wukong being hovered. Nika, an undying performance there in game number 1. You know, I guess all things considered, this is Obey just saying we played well enough in the early to win the game, and we know what went wrong, and maybe just run back something the exact same.
And I think largely I can get behind that mentality because the start to the early game was great, and that was a good composition. I think they just made a couple of oversteps, but I don't know if that's the kind of thing that's going to change. And the only part of Obey's identity that I've got locked in right now is that Inbound likes to go in and Sino like to go in. So if those were kind of the cruxes of the problem, I don't think that's going to magically change between games 1 and game 2. Just make sure this is a team that's prepared to play around that sort of dive-heavy style from those 2 players. I think that's truly all they would need. But again, with the great start they had to the game, I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with trying it again.
I wish I, you know, had a button that just said it's the same, because I'd be slamming it here. Thoth and
saving
Soul.
yourself a lot of talking, right?
Right, saving plenty of effort here on my part. All right, something different again. Nash is banned out.
Okay.
So now SSG are at least going to have a different look in that department. They'll have a chance to show us what direction they go. But, you know, again, it was sort of, you know, a quiet game because you're Ganesh and you don't show up in the kill column ever. So a quiet game in that regard, I suppose, from Raffer. But, you know, you can still have sort of that identity with this Kuzenbo. You run in, you find some lockdown, and you can disrupt these team fights differently. The route to getting there is different, but maybe similar impact to what a Ganesh can provide.
Right. I think that Ganesh is one of the few Guardians that are really strong right now. Kuzenbo not quite up to that same level, but I don't think we gave Raffer enough credit for how disruptive he was in Game 1. In particularly, he had some really good silences that just really can buy a few extra moments, a few extra seconds for the rest of the squad to get there. Similarly, the same thing can be done with Kuzenbo, though, so I agree with you in that regard, but apparently this is what's in the back pocket for Inbound when the Kuzenbo is not there.
Does that kind of ring true with what we said about Inbound, though? Sylvanas and run-at-you mentality, does that kind of connect in your mind?
I think one part that does connect is Bobby loves to go for high reward plays regardless of the risk associated. And I think Sylvanas pull is one of those sort of high variance types things he likes to go for, right? There are times you can get a Sylvanas pull through a wall maybe or a pull to interrupt a dash, something like that, and that turns an entire team fight around. Plus Sylvanas does have great team fight presence when he doesn't get too bullied in the early game. He's rather immobile and can certainly die easily. As long as Bobby can avoid maybe getting picked off on his own, it can get to the point where he can look for those high variance plays. I think the Sylvanas does make some good sense with the way he likes to play. Again,
I think you look at Obey and they've drafted, well, all things. They've given themselves a chance as they load into the game, and I think that's a great starting point. I think they've got a good team fight here between Ama, Cupid, Sylvanas, some lockdown there, and then Merlin to really cap off that damage. SSG had to make a couple of changes. We've talked about the Kuzenbo, but now the Robin out of the jungle. How do you like the SSG chances heading into Game 2?
I mean, I really like them. Obviously, you've got a core backline in Freya and Jingwei that is always going to be good. And now you have this dominant frontline, the Kuzenbo, Sun Wukong, plus Robin to sort of carry you through that early game. Not going to be quite the same as Cheerio on the Naja last game, taking people out of fights. But the Robin should be able to do it the other way by just outright killing them very, very quickly with all the damage he's able to provide.
Yeah, death is another form of CC, I suppose. Obey looking to turn a great early game into a win here in Game 2. SSG looking to finish them off. Let's go down to your casters to maybe round out the day.
Thanks again, Dave. And that's right, with 40% of the gods changing in this game, maybe something good is going to happen for Obey. But Mifflin, I am standing by one sentence, and hopefully I don't fail at this, but I'm going to try my best to say nothing about any lead for Obey until we're at 15 minutes in, when Dardes and Vote finish off enough items that they're going to start hitting hard, because that really was the path last game took.
It really was, man, and it's going to be even harder now for them to establish a lead in the early game because Space Station boosted their early game hard. Rapper on this Kuzumo is going to be dominant at controlling space. We saw it from Bobby in the early game last time that he was finding a ton of damage. He was able to set up a lot of these fights. And now Cherio behind the wheel of a Robin. This guy is one of the best early game assassins that you could hope for. His damage output, his gank potential, mobility, safety, he's got a lot of tools that are going to propel them into the mid game very easily. And once they get there, well, you've got the backing of Dardes on Jingwei. You've got Vote on this Freya. It's going to be very hard for Obey to deal with this early pressure, but if they make it through, Obey's team fight might just be better.
Well, speaking of early pressure, Raffer taking this Kuzenbo seems to be putting the hurt onto Obey. Already had to use the beads is Wowie. And yes, Sylvanas brings in the healing, and Mifflin, I cannot understate how excited I am to see a Sylvanas. I just think it's going to have a tough time here because of, well, things like this. Raffer might get rooted by that passive occasionally, but for the most part, I think that Inbound maybe is going to make some big differences, but I don't know if the Sylvanas is going to be the end-all be-all of this game.
I mean, I'm worried about Sylvanas in the same way that I'm worrying about Ymir. He's largely a mobile Guardian who's very easy to exploit in the early game, and already we're seeing that Inbound loves taking aggressive positioning. He's on the enemy red buff.
Now they're going to get aggressive. Cyno's rotated in as well. Raffer looking to get low here. 4 members of Obey rotate in for the kill, but they still haven't been able to get it. Finally, they get that last hit, but now Freya's in here. Jingwei's over as well. Cherio trying to stay alive, but Cyno going to be able to help get that kill. Wolfie trades his life out for the trouble, but now the healing from Sylvanas going to look to pay it off. The tick damage as well going to help Wowie pick up a double kill, maybe trying to make it 3 here if he can find one onto Vote. The Pulse doing whatever it can, but the triple kill early on for the Hunter here for Obey Alliance. A great way, once again, to start off this game.
Obey's got that early game down. That first red buff invade is Obey shining bright like a star, because that's them at their best, and it looked incredibly strong. And a lot of that goes their way because Raffer rotates in to defend that wave, or that buff rather, at level 1. He didn't have a second ability, there was no Nene to block out any of the auto attacks. All he really had was the dash, and it got cancelled out very quickly by a stun from this Cupid. Wowie's positioning in that fight was nearly perfect. A lot is going Obey's way, but even then, we're looking at about a 1,000 gold lead 2 minutes in. Hugely impactful, but they're going to have to do a lot more. They got to continually find this pressure and find that lead and push it even further.
I will never fail to be impressed with how brave some of the players are in the SPL. Notably here, I'm talking about Raffer. Just got triple killed by Wowie, was 2 levels down at the time, and still walked into lane ready to get aggressive if need be. Like, ready to fight. And that is something that I think is going to be impressive. And something I think that kept SSG in that game last time, and one of their strengths is that deficit, they recognize they can play around it even if they are down. I think that's something that's going to come into play here. I mean, they just had living proof of it during the last game, so it's not really something you can argue with. But now, you know, these small little changes, the Merlin coming in with the Sylvanas here for Obey, it feels like it gives me a little bit of late game hope, even if, you know, Sylvanas maybe isn't this end-all be-all, like you said, kind of comparison to Ymir. Pretty easy to exploit, but he can also make some really big plays for you, and with a Merlin behind him when they come into that 3v3 stage, that feels pretty good.
And I think it's also going to be able to mitigate some of the failings we see from Inbound where he gets over-aggressive. Sylvanas is a god that is really going to make you want to play around your team. You want to get the value out of your heal. That ultimate is a good engage tool, but it's also a fantastic fuel tool. You can look for long-range engage, so you don't necessarily have to dedicate your body like he was doing on Kuzenbo. I think this pick might really work around what Bobby's looking to do and make it a lot safer to do it. I'm really, really worried about how well he's going to be able to execute on it. We need him to hit level 5 and then immediately look for some more aggression, likely inside that duo lane, because Sylvanas ultimate onto a Jingwei. You knock her up, she dashes out, you try and chase down after that, she'll likely use her ultimate to escape. But it is going to be very strong into this Freya. If her beads are ever down, that knockup is so long, you set up for the heart bomb, maybe even a Fields of Love, and then you can look for some aggression there. Kali's going to spend the next 10, 15 minutes farming up, so they're going to have to contend with this Robin out of the jungle trying to get proactive a la Cherio.
Not often do I talk about passives here, and you highlighted all of the active things Inbound can do to change the way the game can go for him. But Sylvanas passive, I feel like, is going to help him just a little bit. That whenever you're hit by a melee, there's a chance for them to be rooted. I think it's just going to help peel Cherio, help peel Raffer and Nika just enough that maybe moments like the end of Game 1 just don't happen as often overall, and maybe help him get out of some of these ganks. But you had called for the level 5 mark. Now he is ticked over to there, so we'll have to see how Obey decide to manage the next couple of minutes, because it is again approaching a 2,000 gold lead for them. Still a little bit under, about 1,500 as of right now. But this was how they were able to cultivate it earlier. It's more a question of if they can hold on to it when that power spike is hit, that we'll see from Dardes and from Vote, especially considering Cherio is also going to be coming around his peak about the same time.
Yeah, he's going to hit his power spike very early on. We see Cherio going for the standard ability-based build, could be moving into a Crusher, a Brawler's Beat Stick, or even a Jotun's Wrath. All of those items are going to give him additional pen. His kill potential is going to go a lot higher. He's hitting his power spike way before this Kali ever will, and that's very concerning because we saw last game that a lot of these fights really started to get opened up around those first couple gold threes, the first Pyromancer. If Space Station group up and try and take the fight at 12, 13 minutes, they can very well expect that at least their jungler is going to be at a way higher power spike than Sino will be at that point in the game.
I'm really loving this Wukong. I think more than I wanted to. Like, it feels weird because, again, Wukong may be one of my favorite gods to play, but there's always a part of my brain that's just like, yeah, nah, root against him for whatever reason. And yet seeing it succeed, at least as of right now, he seems to be farming well, matching up in Amaterasu, which I think is very difficult to do. Maybe shows off how good Nika is over there in that solo lane more than anything. And I think what we're seeing right now is just going to be the impact of him. I mean, his rotations, the ability to sit on Wolfie last game was very big for him. Now that Merlin has that blink, maybe going to make it a little more difficult. But he comes in with a stun, a slow, an attack speed slow. It's hard to argue against a Wukong right now.
And not only does he come in with a stun, but he doesn't have to dedicate his ability points into leveling that stun. Now the 72 transformation, you're going to get that fertilization at level 1, means you can max out that Master's Will, get that ability up a lot more often. But Raffer in a little bit of trouble, going to have his ultimate forced out. Nothing ventured, nothing gained for Obey. Weren't quite able to steal away that purple, but they do force out a fantastic team fight ability. Sun Wukong already picked up the Soul Reaver. He's going to be stacking that very easily. And I think that this is an item that has really launched Sun Wukong back into the meta. He's got that cooldown, penetration, that sustain that you lost from Glad Shield, you're making up for in spades with Soul Eater.
Well, Mifflin, I'm having trouble because I'm starting to draw parallels to Game 1 right now. My brain is just making the connections as I see them, and it feels like Obey, once again, maybe want to go for a red buff invade. You've got Wolfie Sino inbound here, ready to jump in. The question is whether or not they feel confident enough to be able to pluck that one away. They throw the ice over the wall, not going to full commit to a fight, which I think is a good call from them. Unfortunately for them, they're not going to be able to get much out of it. Maybe a little bit of pressure across the map as SSG still seem not timid, but reluctant to start fights yet. They're still waiting because they know it's a time game.
This is exactly what I'm talking about with SSG just playing the map incredibly well. The Obey Alliance started off with the triple kill on their Hunter on the first red buff of the game, and already Freya's caught up in levels. iRapper is caught up in levels as well. The XP deficit is slowly declining. You can see it there on the charts. Only 500 split between 5 members. That's just about nothing. The only thing separating these two teams is roughly 1,000 gold, and that gold lead has been slowly declining as the game goes on, and there haven't been really any engagement since that red buff invade.
Yeah, nothing big happening for Obey, and it feels, although, almost, like, because they don't have that Kuzenbo displacing people that Inbound was able to early on the last game, it is slowing it down. And, it almost feels weird because in my mind, you get a good root, you can get a great pull as Sylvanas, but it almost feels like we haven't gotten to see any of those, and I guess it feels that way because we haven't seen any of those. I'm waiting for that first pull to come through. Maybe it's through a wall, maybe it's some hype play. I don't really care if it's something very simple, but either way, it could be impressive. Right now, though, it's a purple buff invade. Raffer going to be able to displace inbound. The ult comes through, but it's going to be a return ult from both members of SSG looking to try and slam some damage down. Raffer loses his life. The purple buff goes to Obey, and so they choose for SSG to invade over here on the blue side. They're still not going to find any kills, but it's buff for buff, and at the end of the day, you only lost your support.
Questionable play from SSG to decide to really hard stick in and try and defend that purple buff there. They knew that they didn't have the numbers. They knew that Cherio was on the other side of the map looking for a blue buff invade. So what happens? You force out Freya beads and ultimate, pick up a kill, get yourself a buff, and you trade out the blue buff on the opposite side of the map. That's a big W for Obey Alliance, and I think that they can continue to do that. If they want to keep playing around this Freya in the early game, they absolutely should. It's the one priority target on SSG that you really have to dedicate time to shutting down. That said, Sino has spent a lot of time hovering around that jungle, just looking for that fight himself. If he keeps slowing down his own farm, he's got to be worried about his own power spikes. I think when you have these two hyper carries, Kali and Freya, Obey need to dedicate the time to developing their own rather than shutting down the enemies.
Now Obey are trying to, well, at least get something done. They've been able to come in, steal a couple of buffs. But now we've got the one-on-one mano-a-mano. And it seems like WoW is going to go ahead and call that one as soon as he can. That Ring of Akate is online now for Vote. And that means it's a little bit of distress for WoW as he runs away. Sino, I think, in a similar position, forced to fall back here with SSG making some rotations around this Gold Fury. Nothing to start up, nothing to steal away. But I think, again, you're starting to feel that pivot. The flow of the water is changing here. And unfortunately for Obey, they have to find at least some sort of solid ground to stand on before it gets out of hand. Because this lead, it was bigger last time, and it still disappeared in the blink of an eye.
Look, I'm not willing to call the changing tides just yet, okay? We're Obey truthers out here, and they are maintaining a lead. I'm waiting to see that first team fight around an objective. Because right now, Obey's really not made that many mistakes. They've been able to push their lead a little bit. They've been able to invade these camps. They've been able to establish a 5-1 slash line. That doesn't happen as a mistake, especially against a team the caliber of Space Station Gaming. I think that Obey's done a good job of utilizing their tools, and maybe even with this pace being a little bit slower, might benefit them. They're not going to open themselves up to nearly as many mistakes, and now Sino's going to have a lot more time to farm up, get himself into that late game position. But it's a double-edged sword. The same can be said of Vote. He's only fell once, and he's got a return kill himself. One level deficit in that duo lane. You might want to look towards shutting down this Freya a little bit more, but both teams have these hyper carries. It's yet to be seen how it's going to play out around this first team fight objective.
It is that patience, I think, that's coming through. Kind of surprisingly, I would argue, from Obey right now, that is keeping things going their way. I mean, they've come in, they'll take a pick, and then they get out. Everything else that we've seen hasn't necessarily screamed, well, Obey's playstyle, right? I mean, it's been much slower pace. It fits to what we see out of SSG, and not necessarily what you even see out of teams like Ghost, right? I mean, you talk about them, it's sub 20 minutes. It definitely is a change in style, but something that Wolfie, I think, among all of them, and Ducky here, are going to be used to for Obey. Maybe them helping pull the reins in on their other teammates right now to kind of fit to the style SSG is going to bring. As long as you maintain that lead, as you had highlighted, you know, 1,500 gold can turn into 6,000 in the blink of an eye just as quick as it can disappear. So there's a lot of ways this game can change still. I think it is around this Gold Fury, if that's even the first one we see. Now that we're, you know, going to be hitting 13 minutes, close to 15 minutes, you could potentially see that be around a Pyromancer. Honestly, if it goes on even longer, the first fight we might see might be over by a Fire Giant.
Yeah, we really can't predict the pace of this match, especially considering it's so wildly different from Game 1. Obey is showing a lot more discipline, and I think it goes to show that they learned from their mistakes already, adapting mid-set, realizing that they got a little bit over-aggressive. They need to rein it in just a little bit, pick their fights a little bit better, group up as a team. But it seems like it's going to be Obey, first one on the scene for an objective.
And they're going to start it up inbound, going to be able to make sure everyone's topped off. A blink for a blink, though. Raffer goes in deep. Sino ends up finding nothing, and now it's going to be the damaged Cherio trying to stay alive. Does manage to do so, but takes a lot in the process. Forced to fall back is Obey, and now SSG in a position to try and pick up the objective that they want, but they're going to say no here, and that leaves Obey wide open to come in and start it right back up where they were. Same health, they've got the Merlin, he's known for burning things down, and now Raffer doesn't have the same engage. No ult, no blink. It might be more difficult for SSG to fight back on this one.
That 2-for-2 ult trade is going to be hugely impactful, and the longer these fights go on, Obey's going to be able to leverage all that sustain. Cupid heals, Sylvanas heals. Raffer, you're in some trouble, bud.
Yeah, burned down like it's nothing there. Doesn't matter that he has the spikes come out on the shell. He gets burned down incredibly fast. Now Vote, seems like him and Dardez were maybe conversing over that Gold Fury, but well, there's only one team left with a tank, and right now it's going to be Obey, but Nika's rotated in, so has Ducky, and I expect to see a dazzling offensive come out here to either re-aggress or find some defense here for Obey Alliance. Already looking to try and lock down Dardez, forces the ult from the Jingwei, and she's going to dive into the backline. Cherio tries to get back in, but unfortunately for him, he's going to take too much. Vote ends up being the one that gets burned down in the process. Sino isn't going to stop there either. He's going to go ahead and go for the double kill. Takes down both carries in one fell swoop, and now, unfortunately for Nika, no mana and virtually no health to try and get through the rest of Obey. The blue team looks to not only turn this lead into even more, now this Gold Fury has one Raffer, one Cherio standing between them, and I don't know if that's going to be enough to stop him here, Mifflin.
Raffer's ultimate is back up, a Field to Lover dropped. He's going to have to force that Kuzumbo ultimate, but the Gold Fury's falling low. Cherio uses his ult as well.
Now they're looking to potentially find themselves a deicide here. 15 minutes into the game, one hit from Ducky's going to be able to get it. Technically, Vote respawn, so it's not the full-on deicide, but it might as well be. It's a full 5-man wipe there on the side of SSG. 6-man if you want to count the first death for Raffer. So a huge turnaround plus a Gold Fury. The patience is paying off here, Mifflin.
I like the play. Obey played it masterfully around that dance around the objective, continually forcing Space Station to respond to the threat that, well, if you leave us here, we're just going to do it. They come in, Space Station gets poked out a little bit. Obey backs up, uses Cupid and Sylvanas healing to resustain, and they continued that dance for so long, slowly working through all of Space Station's ultimates, actives, whittling away at their tools until eventually one big fight erupts and Obey come in with the advantage. I really like the patience from them. Now Gold Fury goes their way. The slash lines bump up to 11-3. We're looking at a 2,000, nearly 3,000 gold lead. Sino sure is starting to hit his power spikes very quickly as well. Obey is benefiting greatly from this slower pace.
And Sino, a part of all 11 kills there, 4, 1, and 7. I think your kills are pretty much exactly where they want to be. Unfortunately, Wowie didn't get a piece of any of that action. A lot of assists, but those 3 kills were still that triple kill that he got at the beginning of the game. But seeing your carry at 3-0-6, knowing that Inbound here is 1-0-7, and then Sino at 4-1-7, you see the ones getting the kills that you want to, and that's allowed this Kali to get the haste, and now she has the chin size. Like the power spike that you're waiting for as a Kali is paying off, and so far, I think this is going to help Sino. He jumped on the backline and got Vote first this last fight. I expect to see more of that from this Kali.
I do as well. And already we're looking at a much, much better game state than we were 17 minutes in the last game if you were an Obey fan. Bobby's up 2 levels over Raffer, so his engage, he hasn't been looking to get nearly as proactive, but when he does, he's going to have a lot more defense on his side.
Oh, but Cherio's over here. Doesn't even give him the chance. Fields of Love was halfway through emerging there before that death finally happened. Wowie, unfortunately, going to get taken down, but you know Cherio's on the other side of the map, so Obey make the call for the Pyromancer. They have to fight through Raffer, Dardez, and now what's going to be a huge team fight over here, looking to burn through Wolfie. Going to be saved, though. The shielding is just so solid, but it's not enough to maintain his life forever. Finally taken down and now zoned out. It's a 1v2 on one side, 2v2 on the other. Raffer is going to pay for it with his life. Cherio not going to be chasing down Sino, instead coming to try and protect his teammate Nika over here. Look for the kill on the Inbound or Ducky. They're both low, but can you continue chasing him? The answer is absolutely yes. They have no issue. A good crit from Dardez, and then the full kit from Cherio makes sure those 2 kills go down, and SSG are starting to pluck back some of what they lost.
Man, this is exactly deja vu of Game 1. The first team fight that Obey take, and they're starting to split up a little bit, have separate 3-on-2, 2-on-2 engagements. SSG punished them greatly. The one thing I noticed there in that team fight that stood out to me greatly, Nobody decided to look at Dardes. He was allowed to free cast the entirety of the time, finding every single auto attack he needed to. Nika's Sun Wukong clone, Wu 2, he confirmed the kill there. Nothing really goes Obey's way, and it's because they're not playing as that cohesive unit that we were seeing in the first 15 minutes of the game. They have to group up, play as 5, use your healing, use your draft at its best, and not let Space Station artificially manufacture these split-up engagements.
And it's going to be difficult at this point. I mean, Sino was doing everything in the tower. He was in a literal 1v2 for part of it. But there's only so much you can do on your own. He managed to stay alive there, and I think that's a huge play for them. But like you said, getting separated like that, SSG more dictating what you do than your own team can in terms of shot calling, I think showcases how much power Space Station have in this late game. And I almost feel the echoing sentiments you had said yesterday while we were casting the Challenger Circuit, where it's like, you know, we're approaching 20 minutes. It's time for the game to start here for Space Station Gaming, and it definitely starts to feel that way. They've hit this late-game power spike. You're starting to see the same items come online, and now, I mean, slowing down Obey to the point where now they've actually even passed them in terms of gold. It's starting to feel like it's slipping out of Obey's hands. Not enough that they've lost, but enough that they have to pay way more attention to every little thing and every small decision they make.
If there's anything that is indicative of how this set has gone, it's the slash lines on their ADCs. Take a peek now. We got 3, 1, and 6 for Wowie, and we've got a 1, 2, 2 for Vote. But who's ahead? Vote is almost 2 levels ahead. These itemizations coming online a lot quicker. It's because Space Station is just farming up the map incredibly well, making sure gold lands on who it needs to. And even though we saw that 3-0 start from Wowie, Obey hasn't really been fighting around this Cupid. They haven't been using the lead where it landed. So instead, they take fights on the right side of the map, in the center of the map, where Wowie can't get involved, and Space Station say, oh, you're not going to use that loaded gun that you established 2 minutes in? That's phenomenal. Let's take the fight now, and Space Station's just going to win out on it.
If you leave a loaded gun on the table and your opponent is on the other side, you can expect to see them pick it up here, and that's exactly what SSG have done. They're trying to turn it onto Obey Alliance. Oni Fury started up by Obey, though. All of SSG is in the neighborhood. It's just how they aggress into this. Who goes first? We've seen a blink from Raffer early on. No blink for Sino to retaliate, so maybe not the same engage that Obey would like. They're going to continue pulling the Fury. Raffer's still here, Nika's still here. Vote has kind of left the engagement. Now the Fury's sitting at about half health. But Obey seem to know a little bit better, and it looks like they potentially want to stop fighting because the jungles are running off all on their own. Instead, SSG going to call the bluff on the Fury. It's going to be Sino versus Cherio over here, and it looks like Cherio's going to lose. That's going to be a good 1v1 for Sino, but now, how does the rest of the fight go for the team? Good knock-up coming down from inbound. Good Fields of Love to call the disengage for Obey, and the healing's going to help keep him alive, but Nika isn't going to let them live long on his own. He's going to be dashing back to his team, trying to stay alive. This Fury's been bouncing back and forth, but Sino's joined the fight, looking for his target, but that's going to be the immunity up in the skies from Vote, and Sino loses his life in the process. Now Ducky just trying to stay alive, holding on by a thread, but the thread is not strong enough. Vote going to be able to confirm that one, and in the blink of an eye, it turns around. Obey forced to run away here. Now they're not even going to be able to contend this Fury as they just try to pick up a red buff and stay alive.
That's a tough loss there for Obey. Their only job after Sino got that solo kill on a Cherio was to back up, wait for them to regroup as 5, and then re-engage. But by the time Sino got there, Space Station was already winning the engagement, and I could almost hear it in his voice as he looks for that fight onto the Freya. The second Valkyrie Discretion comes through, Sino's got to be saying something along the lines of, oh, she still had that? You've been fighting for over a minute now. And then immediately he's out of position, he has to force into using his ultimate, has to disengage, and then loses his life to just AoE damage around him. That's a tough loss for Obey, especially considering how the engagement started. I mean, Sino literally 100-0 Cherio in a completely separate fight, and then came in for a numbers advantage engagement and just lost out on it. Not only the fight, but also the objectives. Space Station are really starting to build themselves up a nice lead.
It's not often you get to genuinely see a fight in a vacuum, right? Where it is a true 1v1. It's either happening at the very beginning of the game or, well, I guess right there when everyone decides to disengage from the team fight. And now you can see how that's going to affect Obey. Pyromancer, a couple of hits away from dead, and it looks like SSG are going to be able to confirm this one pretty easily for themselves. Obey poke their head in, but decide that it's not going to be worth their time. And it feels like they just don't know how to approach this, how to crack the egg that Space Station Gaming has put in front of them, because it's just so difficult to figure out how to break them apart.
It really is. And now Space Station know they can just take these fights wherever they need to. They don't have to take that risky 50-50 engagement on Fire Giant. Instead, they're going to push their lead by pressuring down the mid tower, and Obey, a little bit slow on the uptake, wasn't quite there in time to even put up a soft defense. SSG open up the map entirely. Now, if they do decide to go to Fire, Obey doesn't have that bastion of safety in mid to rely on. They've got nothing. There's no tower there. It's dead. It's crumbled. It's ash. And now Space Station have complete control of that right side objective-centric part of the map.
Well, Obey are still wandering around as 5, maybe a small, slightly larger, I should say, split from SSG in terms of where they're grouping, so it could end up resulting at least in a tier 1 here if Obey are looking to push down mid, but it might be too much. Raffer's looking to loop around. He can just choose one person on Obey and, well, cause their life to be ruined in the matter of seconds. But that's going to be a good pull. The first one we've really gotten to see connect from inbound. Unfortunately, it's not going to be enough. Nika is still Wukong. He can still disengage pretty easily. Felt like it was going to be something more, but it's a lot for a tier 1 tower here for SSG.
Every bit of poke that Obey is able to get without getting damaged themselves is huge because they have healing.
And now Raffer's going to be right back into it, inbound, doing whatever he can to stay alive. Or Ducky, that's trying to stay alive here. Unfortunately for him, it's not going to last long. The Valkyrie's discretion rips through the remaining portion of his health bar. Wolfie goes down right before that, and now the healing from inbound is crucial to keep Wowie and Sino in this fight. Sino looking for the backline. Fields of Love looking to help slow things down, but the good pushback there from Raffer is going to ensure that Sino not only can get his target, but he is going to get eliminated in the process as well. SSG looking to barrel down a tier 2 in mid, potentially find themselves a couple more kills. Inbound has nowhere to go. Vote looking to show what a late game Freya can do here, even diving the Phoenix for this one. One more hit is all it takes. The tier 2 is going to go down, and they're looking at a very similar game state to game number 1, 30 seconds uncontested. They're going to look to run it forward, but their health bars are pretty low.
I don't think they'll be able to go for the Titan, especially with Wolfie spotting the next 10 seconds. But that right there is exactly the strength that Freya brings. I mean, hold down W, hold down left click. I don't care if they damage me back. I'm life stealing it all up. And I love the team play we saw. Once Sinosure jumped into the backline, tried to find the kill on the vote, uses his ultimate, uses his beads, but still the CC, the team play, the body blocking from Space Station, it was too much. At no point did it really look like Sino was able to confirm that kill himself. And it's just after that, Sino's dead. That was the main threat that Obey has. Let's gas pedal forward. And it seemed like Bobby and Wowie themselves just weren't quite ready for that level of aggression to get caught out on the backswing.
Man, and don't these graphs not only mirror each other perfectly, but show just the perfect story of this game. Obey takes a small lead, turns it into something, feels really good, and then it just jumps off a cliff from there and plummets down into Space Station Gaming territory. Now, I think a lot of it depends very, very much on this Fire Giant. Fire minions in mid already. It's going to get pulled here by Obey, but this might end up being a mistake. In fact, Ducky is isolated right now, killed almost like it's nothing by Raffer, of all people, getting credit for it. Now Nika able to jump into the backline, does get rooted and locked down, so it is at least going to be a little bit of pull, but Sino goes in, uses the ult, doesn't get a kill. Dardez remains alive, now is going to be able to back and use that passive to get right back into it. Nika, one hit away, the Fire Giant for the assist there. He's going to be able to pass that one over to inbound, but it's the Valkyrie's discretion and Vote's damage right now. That is the name of the game. Can SSG continue this tear? Right now, the answer seems like no. Cheerio goes down thanks to Wowie. Vote is half health, and one good pull could do it, but inbound just off the mark. Sino doesn't care. He goes in, and now they're chasing him down one by one. Dardez versus the world. He finds one, but he's not going to be able to continue this warpath, and Obey walk away with a huge swing in their favor.
Great team fight from Obey. I love the ultimate from inbound, able to separate the fight. Ducky falls a little bit early, but at the same time, he drags Space Station into this 4-on-4 engagement where they really weren't favored. They were all stacked up. They got hit by the majority of Wolfie's damage as well. I mean, it was a risky Fire Giant call from Obey. Completely crazy, if you ask me, going for it on a 5-on-5 engagement. 8,000 gold down, but it works out for them, and now Dardez is the only one that can defend.
Well, he's doing his best. Ducky, dazzling offensive, going to go for the stun. That's going to be the ult from Dardez, and he's not going to be able to land in time to get a shot off. So now he's just looking to get away with his life. Wolfie doesn't have a lot of mana. Sino doesn't have a lot of life. So it looks like the call is actually going to be able to leave the mid laner alone, especially since they need to defend this middle lane with all the fire minions coming through. But Mifflin I mean, Sino's having a hell of a game. 7-3 and 10, 6-2 and 8 there for Wowie as well. The damage numbers maybe not doing as much in their favor, but you're seeing it be applied perfectly for them. And that fight, I mean, it just gets out of hand for SSG so quickly.
It does, and now we're looking at a siege situation. Obey is slightly behind in gold, about 4,000, but they have Fire Giant. If they're able to clear out all these Tier 2 towers, the Tier 1 tower, maybe even confirm themselves a gold 3 if they get there before Space Station eat it up, that will be a huge swing in their favor. But the siege potential from Obey's draft is going to be very hard to execute on. Sylvanas doesn't have that traditional engagement that you'd like to see from maybe a warrior support or even a Geb where you can blink in and find that huge ultimate. It's going to be a lot more based on how well he's able to find that pull, because he decided to go these more team fight oriented relics. He went for Shell and the Frenzy instead of something along the lines of a Blink or a Heavenly. Now it's really going to be completely on Ducky to separate the engagement, and then maybe we'll see inbound this huge tree lumber into the engagement. We need Wowie on these towers. Wolfie's going to have a very hard time contending with the backline dive potential from Space Station, especially considering that really there's not much peel potential on the side of Obey barring the Sylvanas. I'm very worried for how these fights are going to play out. All I know is they need to start clearing out these towers, and they need to start doing it quickly because Fire Giant timer is starting to slowly tick down.
Almost 2 minutes already gone off of that Fire Giant, and well, they successfully respawned their Phoenix, so it wasn't all for naught, but they haven't been able to take a bite at that gold deficit so far, and now they're finally going to be able to aggress Tier 1 tower. Should honestly not even matter to anybody at this point in the game, 30 minutes in. You can see that SSG looking to potentially mount a defense around the Tier 2, not something you see too often against a team with Fire Giant, so you can see the confidence and feel their confidence in the fight. Sino's positioning looks like someone who wants to get into the back line, but right now it's a stalemate. In fact, it's going to end up getting ended here by Space Station. Mika wants to jump in, and now it's going to be the aggression from Raffer trying to separate and conquer. Sino goes down in the jungle, and now it's a 5v4. You take Raffer out of the fight, you burn him down to death, but is it going to be enough? Ducky has no health, neither does Wolfie or Wowie. That's going to be a triple kill here for Cheerio as he just burns through Obey. Now they're looking to clean up inbound one last time. The Phoenix in mid is weakened. They have plenty of time to run this. This feels like a game-ending play. Cheerio is running the opposite way, but his team knows where to go. It's going to be for the Titan.
And they've got that weakened Phoenix in mid. That's going to be just thin paper standing between them and the Titan. Obey, again, just getting a little bit overzealous. The second they establish a lead, they move up. If you are going to draft around the sustained focus comp, have a Cupid, have a Sylvanas, use the Fire Giant heal, you don't have to commit to the first fight given to you by Space Station. Space Station dropped a lot of ultimates. They looked for the weird engage on top of that Tier 2 tower. Had Obey decided, okay, well, they used all their tools. None of us have really died just yet. We can back up, re-engage after we've healed, and then just have the advantage in the fight. But instead, they dig in their heals, defend there. Sino gets picked in the side of the jungle without getting his ultimate off. Nothing really goes their way in that last fight, man.
It does feel like it falls apart for them, but I will say, at least in my eyes, a huge swing for Obey. Being able to keep SSG, of all teams, I think right now on their toes for 30 minutes there, and maybe not quite as long in Game 1, but showcasing a lot of growth from week to week is going to be Obey. So I think eyes should be on them in positive light, even though they come out of this with 2 losses. It's a good win for SSG, but maybe also a good loss for Obey. So let's go to the desk and hear them talk about it.
That's it for this week in the SPL, and as such, Mifflin now has a chance to go do some laundry and get that Obey jersey clean, maybe for next weekend against their matchup against Radiance. Wash this set off of it, Mifflin. Not the best look here for your squad. Finch, though, it's another, I think, run back from kind of the game 1 vibe that we saw from this Obey team, where the good that I think you can kind of grasp onto, and I think Gore pointed it out, some growth potential, is that they have these fantastic starts. At least in this set, they had some good starts, and you just couldn't convert it once more to a full-blown win.
It really feels to me like they have this weird sort of all-or-nothing energy, and I think that it would behoove them to maybe try to mitigate their losses to some extent. How many of those fights are nearly full team wipes that they end up losing Dulcin? Or what about when they're on the Fire Giant and Ducky just stands like right at the Fire Giant and sticks it right up until his death? I mean, I don't know, man. I feel like they don't have this middle ground. You heard Mifflin say they took that fight in mid. The first fight they were given, they were all in committed onto it until they got decided. highlighted, it's tough. It feels like Obey still haven't quite found their balance. What makes it even harder is that Space Station played really, really well at times this game. This wasn't their cleanest game by any means either, but Cheerio really played well from what I was able to see. Dardas has made me think that I should be playing my Jingwei mid from now on. Also, Obey can't just give them Freya 2 games in a row, Dolson. It makes life so much harder. Do you remember Sino had a loop around on the Gold Fury when they looked like they were going to have a good fight where he solos out Cheerio, but Vote banishes him, puts instant a bunch of damage into it. Sino has to leave. He ends up dying. I think they're giving up too much value. They're not fighting cleanly, and they're not doing enough to mitigate their losses either.
Right, what you're giving up, I mean, you and I were kind of joking watching the game. You know, Sino's, 6-1-4 or something like that, and still wasn't able to fully execute some of the backliners for SSG. So I think as much, in a weird way, kind of backhanded praise, I suppose, on Obey for good starts to both of these games. I do think, giving props to Space Station for the good, the kind of two halves here. If Obey, you combine Obey's early with SSG's late, you have a perfect game here from either of these teams. So I think SSG, by and large, had a great mid to late game fight here today. They improved themselves to 3-0 and continue to be one of the more difficult teams to beat here in this league. MVP, it's hard to kind of point out here, I think, in this set, Finch, but did anyone stand out maybe for you there in our second game of the set?
I don't know. I think Dardas played very well in both of those games, Dolson, and really showed me that he can play basically whatever it is that he feels like in that middle lane at a really high level. Their 3v3 continues to be very impressive to me, so I think some combination of Dardas and Rafford probably have to get that MVP for me.
Yeah, I don't think you're too far off on that one. All of SSG, though, they came to play, and they got themselves the 2-0 win over Obey, and they moved themselves to 3-0. As mentioned here in the SPL. Gormizer standing by with one of the SSG boys after a big win.
That's right, I'm going to be down here with Nika, the guy playing Wukong throughout those last couple of games, and you look good doing it, man. I just want to know, you're playing these games, you come into Obey, and they had a strong early game both times, so just as far as Space Station was going, how did you fight back from that deficit so early on?
I think we just made some sloppy decisions at the start of both games, so we just had to make sure we could recover. We knew if we got to mid-late game, we have pretty much all split so far, that we could, outfight teams. So after, losing early on, we just tried to stall out the game as long as we could, pretty much.
I kind of want to know, the beginning of Game 2 there, Wowie comes in, there's a red buff invade, gets a triple kill. Was there any kind of demoralization going on when the team, was everyone starting to feel down at that point, or did you just kind of go, oh, well, happens, and then move on?
No, I think everyone was fine, I think they knew that they kind of chose the wrong targets in that fight, or just it wasn't a great fight to take in general. But you can't really get down in an SPL game even if things go badly. You can always make a comeback, so you just got to stay strong mentally.
Well, right now you've been playing Wukong through both of these games, and he looked good each time you brought him in. A couple of changes for him in mid-season. Would you say that he's back in the solo laner meta?
Definitely, yeah. I just like him because you can go a lot of damage and get away with it just because he's so hard to lock down. And I think the comps Obey had made it really easy for Wukong to work as well as it did as well. They didn't really have any hard CC for me, so I think it looked a lot better than it would most of the time. But he's definitely a strong god. I think he's definitely up there with Amy, for example.
Well, again, it looked really good, and you got away with it, so you were able to do what you wanted that game. But now the team's undefeated. You're feeling good. You're looking good so far this phase compared to the start in Phase 1. How's the team's morale right now here in Phase 2, knowing that there's still quite a ways to go towards the end?
We're good right now. We're scrimming pretty well, a lot better than we did at the start of last phase anyway. We're just having a good time taking it slowly because, like you said, there's so much left for the split still, so trying to get burnt out, really, having a good time.
Now keep the smooth pace that you've got going, because everything seems to be working as it is right now. Well, we're excited to see you. It was a fun game and fun set to watch. Congratulations once again on your win. Thanks for your time, but we're going to throw it back to the desk to end the day.
Yeah, thanks to Nika, and big congrats to SSG once more. 2-0 weekend here for them in the SPL. Obey more recently, and then the big matchup against Sanguine on Friday where SSG rolled their way to the 2-0 win there. Finch with me to round out, though, this week in the SPL. Largely successful weekend, though, Finch, from SSG. Can't hang anything short there. We talked on the SPL pregame show on Friday about how this was a big weekend for Sanguine. And I don't want to hang too much on these guys, but it's an 0-2 weekend. Granted, they're going against SSG and Radiance, two of the 3-0 teams currently here in this league. And as the standings sort of shake out, they are now 1-2, good for 4th. Still very close knit there in the standings. What are your thoughts on where this Sanguine squad stands maybe after a tough weekend for them?
I know it is tough. They went up against two of the very best teams that we have in this league, but I think the difference between being middle of the pack and the difference between being one of the top teams is that when you have those tough schedules, you're able to come away with at least one set victory somewhere in there. So Sanguine have got to keep showing us against the very best that they're able to consistently play at that level we know they're capable of.
And kind of the final maybe gut reaction takeaways from what we saw with Obey here today. I think it's got to be an improvement over what we've seen from them previously. Still a ways to go, but do you at least like some of the changes that you saw this squad bring?
Yeah, I think it'd be hard not to, right? I mean, I don't know that they've had leads quite like what they had today anytime up until this set today, so obviously that is something. And if all they have to work on going forward is finding ways to close games out, then that's certainly better than having to work from the ground up to fix their entire game. So Obey certainly looking better.
Yeah, excited to see the growth that they continue to bring. Longer phase, more time for Obey to work out some of those issues. Hopefully, we'll see them back stronger next week up against Radiance. But that's it for Week 2 of Phase 2 of the SPL here in Season 7. On behalf of myself, Finch, all the other casters, everyone back in production, thanks for watching. We'll see you on Friday.